Piece of black power, piece of black power, piece of black power. Piece of black power, piece of black power, piece of black power. I hope my sound is good. I hope my sound is good. I hope my sound is good. This is the Few the Proud, the For Real TV. And of course, I'm your host, Raheem the Drain, coming right back at you with some more black history, some more real history, not just black history, our real history. And tonight, I'm going to let someone tell it better than I ever could. I'm going to bring on one of our master teachers. I'm going to let one of our master teachers put this game to you. I'm going to let him spit this game to you. And all you're going to need to do is just listen in, listen in, listen in. That's all you're going to have to do. So simple, so easy, so misunderstood. I hope you can listen. I hope you can listen. And I'm going to bring on him. I'm going to put up a master teacher that you all probably never heard of because he haven't been pushed by the people y'all look up to, which is Mr. Gilmore. Mr. Gilmore don't push this brother here. He's no longer with us. He is real, our real history, and he's a master teacher. But once again, this is the Few the Proud, the For Real TV. Let me get myself on the screen here. Excuse me a minute here. Okay. All right. Yeah. But he's one of our master teachers, Dr. John Henry Clark. I'm going to bring him on and let him give you our real history. So I'm going to give people some time to get into the building. If they come in, they do. And if they don't, I'm still going to, I just put it on up and just let it roll. I should clean these nasty glasses and just let it roll. You understand what I'm saying? And, I'm going to let's give a shout out to the For Real team. I'm going to give a shout out to all my brothers and sisters around the world. I hope you had a good, prosperous day. And I hope you're fine. I hope your families are fine. Still putting some things together for the For Real team. Waiting to hear back. Waiting to hear back from some powers that be. I'm at a point to where I really don't think, these people really want to help these kids. I think, from what I'm seeing, it's just a job to them. It's just a job to them. They really don't care. And the people I'm dealing with, even though I know they don't have control, they have control to a certain extent, but I'm dealing with people that look like us. And they dragging their feet. Everything they asked me to do, I didn't did. I didn't call them and left messages, and I still haven't heard anything. And when I was down there, I had asked the sister. I asked. I said, "Y'all really? Do y'all really want to help these kids? Or is it just a job to you? If it's just a job to you, I can understand it. Just say that, but don't make it hard for the people who want to volunteer their time, not getting paid for it, not getting paid for it, volunteer their time to help the kids." And you'd be surprised how hard it is just to, to get that together. But, it is what it is. Every time they throw up a wall, I tear it down. You dig what I'm saying? So I'm just going to keep pushing on till I reach my goal. Because it's not a problem, it's just a challenge. Because I don't have problems, I have challenges. So I know it's just a challenge. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. And once again, this is the Future Proud Live for Real TV. And of course, I'm your host, Raheem the Dream, better known as Top Cat. Give me a second here. I want to make sure I'm live on all my other platforms. Okay, right, black guy, you right, black guy, you right, black guy, you. And once again, this is the Future Proud Live for Real TV. And I just want to give a shout out, peace and black power to all my brothers and sisters around the world. And I hope everybody is fine. I hope your families are fine. I know I said that already, but I always like to repeat myself. And I'm trying to give people time to get into the building. Okay. But, it's no problem. What I'll do is I'm going to get my information up and hope it do what I need to do. So bear with me a minute here. Hopefully I can get this up. Um, okay.
The subject of Black history is in dispute in some quarters. A man named J.A. Rogers, who was laughed at 20, 30 years ago, not taken seriously at all, is being taken very seriously these days. A new book called Great Black Men of Color has been edited by our guest tonight, Professor John Henry Clarke. Professor Clarke, there are some rather startling, to put it mildly, revelations made in the book about certain presumed facts of history that I'm certain will not stick with the general white historical community.
Well, I'll tell you, it became almost necessary for the Europeans to whiten up a part of Black history when they began to take over the world in the 15th and the 16th century. And what Rogers has done is gone back and taken a whole lot of the white away and showed you the original Black faces of certain people in history. In this 2-volume work, World's Great Men of Color, Volume 1 is devoted to the Old World, and Volume 2 is devoted to the New World. The first thing he does is to put Egypt in proper context and to show Egypt and the great personalities of ancient Egypt as black people. And it might be startling, but he reveals that Cleopatra did not look like Elizabeth Taylor and wasn't a white woman at all. And I think his book starts in Egypt with the other great characters in Egypt, Imhotep, the real father of medicine, father of architecture, builder of the step pyramids, forerunner of astronomer, a man who was accepted as a god in Europe long before the birth of Christ. Imhotep lived about 5,000 years ago. And early Europe accepted quite a few Africans as deities. Imhotep was one of them. He opens the book actually with this great African who was the world's first multi-genius.
You said that Rogers put Egypt in its proper perspective. What did you mean by that?
I mean, if European historians acknowledge that ancient Egypt was a black nation, then they would have thrown all Western history out of kilter, because Western historiography is based on the mistaken concept that if Egypt wasn't European, it was at least Oriental. It was neither. Because Rogers traced, as many competent historians, black and white, have already done, the southern origins of Egypt, and that the people who would later be called Egyptians came from deep within Africa, maybe Ethiopia and Somaliland. And they kept good relationships, good and bad, like all families, with the people to the south all of this time. And the proof is positive. And do not think that Rogers is out on a black thing, or that most black historians are out on a solely black thing. Most of us got our most radical information from white writers that other white historians do not read, such as Gerald Massey and his 6-volume classic work called Egypt, Light of the World, which proved positively that ancient Egyptians were black. Count Vorez and his Ruins of Empires. Gustav Hearns in a 6-volume work, Researches in the Ancient History. The early work of the American Egyptologist Breasted, Sir Wallace Budge. And so we are going to radical historians, especially Massey and his Natural Genesis and the Book of the Beginning, establish behind them the black perspectives in history. And if white historians accept the black perspectives in history, they would have to admit that the white perspectives in history is wrong. And I'm afraid they're not quite equal to that right now.
Well, what is the, if there is a black perspective in history, there is a white perspective in history.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, I'm assuming, that history is being manipulated for an end
in itself. History, the Europeans began to manipulate history when they rose and began to expand into the broader world in the 15th and the 16th century, because they had to justify the slave trade and they had to justify the colonial system that followed. And modern racism has its incubation in that period. You cannot enslave a man and say he's a human being, that he has humanity, and that he was one of the forerunners of the world's religion. You cannot enslave an African and say this about him, because if you say he's a human being, then you're saying he's an extension of you. Then you cannot sell an African Christianity and call him a heathen and acknowledge the African contribution toward the creation of Christianity. So it's a contradiction in acknowledging that the man created Christianity, then come back and say that you are selling him Christianity because he is a heathen. So the European had to literally strip history of the contributions of non-European people. To a certain extent, they did this in Asia. Now, what Rogers has done in these 2 books is to go back and set history in some kind of perspectives based on this information, and all of the information did not come from black historians.
Well,
It came from the best records available from all of them.
Now, speaking of information, Rogers has alleged some very startling things, and we're using that word because I think in the context of having had only white history, anything black is startling. And so I'm saying it in a positive way. That some of his information has said that there were a number of American presidents who actually were black, that there were a number of prominent Americans that history has treated as whites, who by his criterion or criteria of who was black and white, according to society's definition, were black.
Oh, now, not according to Rogers' definition now. Understand, and this is the irony of it all, and this is the trap. Black people have never written any definitions of race, any definitions of what a people mean, has been. I mean, they have never said that these people with these kind of traits belong here, because modern racism had its development in the pseudo-scientific development of intellectual Europe after the 15th century. And they began to say that certain kind of people belong to certain kind of race, and they created the concept of race and racism itself. Now, according to the laws that's still on the statute book of the United States and some other parts of the world, one drop of us makes you a whole. Now, this ridiculous law and stipulation and measurement has given black people a lot of white people according to that law. Now, it has given us Beethoven, who was called a dark Moor. Now, he was probably one of the many olive-complected Europeans that you see in the millions throughout Europe. But in the States, in the United States, they say that if you have one drop of blood of a black person, you're a whole black person. Now, by this stupid law, we have a whole lot of white people. There's a whole lot of people that think they're white that belong to us. We might claim all of South America because the Spaniards were mulattoes when they got there, having been mixed with the Moors for nearly 800 years. And they were even before the Moorish conquest. Mediterranean Europe was highly mixed with Africans. Nobody thought anything of it because they were a mixture of power and influence and trade, and they got along fairly well together for hundreds of years before they turned on each other. And I don't say it did the Europeans any harm, because the handsomest people in Europe are the olive-complected people who mix with the Africans.
You're saying, in essence, that there's no such thing as a race.
Oh, I maintain that race is the phoniest issue ever invented by the mind of man. The European invented and developed the concept of race. There's really no such thing as a race, because nature created no races. The whole race is a man-made thing, you know.
Well, how did people get to be French and English?
Well, different climatic conditions and migrations and amalgams of different people, and migrations of people into your country, migrations of people out. All right. Now, this is an ethnic grouping as against what we call race. If you go back and you look at an old dictionary, you won't even find a definition for a race. Race grew out of the pseudo-scientific development of Europe. And this is what Rogers was addressing himself to, and saying that according to your rule, which is ridiculous, a lot of you belong to us.
Well, in another context, if race is arbitrary, then could we say that being called black was a political term? It's
a political term, and a term which indicates our self-awareness at this juncture in history. And I think we really need it. We need to really bathe in blackness for a while, but I wish we'd get the bath over with and go on to something a little more important, because black in itself is not an ethnic term. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. We are essentially an African people. Wherever we live on this earth, we're essentially an African people. And we relate to the millions of African people throughout the world, including the uncounted millions of Africans in Asia. The word Afro-American or African-American would probably be more appropriate and more honest and more in keeping with what we actually are, because all of us are not positively, physically, real jet black. And so the argument now sometimes is between the supernationalists and the mild nationalists and blacker than thou, when blackness is a state of mind, a state of attitude, a state of approach to things that can exist in almost any of us, including from the blonde black person to the jet black. And the jet black can be traitors, and they can be patriarchs. They can be a whole lot of. See, we've been everything in history from saint to buffoons. We are complete people, and we need to start looking at ourselves as a complete people. And I think that once we convinced ourselves that we're black and beautiful, we'll stop saying it and just go ahead and be black and beautiful and release a whole lot of energy for more important things.
All right, since you said that J.A. Rogers was a chronicler that related events, what is there in these two volumes in terms of facts that would be beneficial to Black Americans in the regaining of our lost heritage?
In terms of facts, is that J.A. Rogers goes through history and places in proper perspectives with documents the role of the Black personality in history, beginning from the origin of man in Africa to the present time. And I'm saying that Black people need a measurement of the role that they have played in history. And Rogers was the pioneer in the search for the Black personality in history and his role. And this is important because through Rogers, in his first volume on the Old World, you can see what the Africans achieved and what the Africans not only achieved within Africa, but the conflicts among African and how these conflicts were settled. Egypt was invaded from within Africa, which began the decline. That was the Kushite invasion, led by that magnificent trio of Black generals, Castor, Pianki, and Taharqa. And the interesting thing about these men, especially Taharqa, the last of the trio, is that he not only controlled what is Kush, was part of Ethiopia and the Sudan of today and Egypt, but he invaded Libya and practically all of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran, all in those areas. And in those areas, he found both friends and foes. Now, if he found friends and enemies, if he found people in the Middle East willing to fight with him, he a Black general. This tells you that color wasn't such a major factor, but the power, the rise and fall of power. Rogers tells us some other interesting things in Volume 1. Actually, I wish we had time just to deal with Volume 1 alone, because it tells you of the early European invaders of Africa, after he finished telling you about Akhenaten and the great queens of Egypt, and that woman, the first truly great woman in history, Hatshepsut, about the Black generals who served in white armies. Cletus Nigra, who was one of the commanding generals in the army of Alexander. And he deals with the romance around Alexander, which shocked the hell out of some people, because Alexander not only did not die worrying about no worlds to conquer, he died in a drunken stupor, and all this is documented. He threw a dagger at Cletus Nigra, the Black general, who differed with him in front of his high command. And he died in self-reproach after this act, not worrying about no more worlds to conquer. It's another thing. And another aspect of Alexander, which I call the so-called great, that we need to take into consideration is Alexander was a magnificent diplomat, probably one of the most brilliant diplomats ever. He really wasn't much of a warrior. In fact, one of the main reasons why Cletus Nigra could kid him, because he had saved his life on the battlefield a number of times. And Alexander, after he got into Asia Minor, was ridiculing Greek soldiers. And Cletus Nigra, the Black general, told him, you wasn't, as for Greek soldiers, you really, in effect, not so hot yourself. And he reminded him of the time that he saved his life. And Alexander was a little bit embarrassed and insulted by having this mention in front of his high command. And he was drinking too much at the time anyway. Now, that takes a whole lot of romance out of history to treat Alexander that way, but it's documented truth.
Well, what are some of the statements, facts, allegations that Rogers makes specifically about who prominent white Americans were, who he now says were black?
Well, he said that 5 of our presidents were black, and considering the fact that the ones that were black seemed to be about the poorest presidents we had, I'd rather not bother about getting into names, but advise you to read the small book by J.A. Rogers called Our 5 Negro Presidents and argue with someone else. But
are there any of the families of these presidents alive who acknowledge that one of their ancestors who was a president was black?
I'll name one, which because there's been so much writing about it and so much proof, and because some of the families are still alive, and someone want to run this down. President Harding had black blood, had some of what we call Negro blood.
Mm-hmm. Where is this documented?
There were several articles on it. Alan Morrison, the late Alan Morrison, used to be New York editor of Ebony, did an article on it in the first Negro Digest years ago. But I'll tell you another one, which where the documents are a little clearer. That's Alexander Hamilton. He wasn't a president, but he was very prominent. Sure. Alexander Hamilton, whose mother was a black woman from the West Indies.
Are there any other prominent Americans that you can think of that are named in? This would be the second volume.
Mm-hmm. That would be the second volume in which he names permanent Americans who obviously had what we refer to as Negro blood. Robert Browning, the Englishman, and he documents that too. Who had laid court to Elizabeth Barrett. And
I think Alexander Dumas was one of the people he named.
Oh, Alexander Dumas. There's no question about Alexander Dumas. He was a brown-skinned man with a bush. I mean, we don't argue about the Dumas, but there were 3 Dumases. Understand that. Not just Alexander Dumas. We talk about grandfather, father, and son. Now, one Alexander Dumas, black general, West Indian descent, was second in command to Napoleon. In fact, he was Napoleon's artillery commander in the Egyptian campaign. And when the French were voting for someone to take over the French army, Napoleon won by 1 vote. In other words, the French were liberal enough at that time to accept a black man as commander-in-chief of their armies. I'm sorry, they didn't elect Alexander Dumas. It would have saved them a lot. And a whole lot of things Napoleon did was useless and nothing but the washing of French ego and costing a whole lot of French money. The one thing I don't think Alexander Dumas would have done is to going into that ice box called Russia in the dead winter time. He wouldn't have played no fool like that. Now, the other 2 Alexander Dumas, you need to separate because most people merge them. Now, the father of French adventure literature, the 3 Musketeers and the like, that's one Alexander Dumas. Now, the author of Camille and the Romantic tradition in French literature, that's his son. Now, although father and son did not get along, but they stem from the same cloth. So there was actually 3 Alexander Dumases. One was a military man, served under Napoleon, who lost command of the French army to Napoleon by 1 vote. The other one who began the adventure literature, and the other one who began the romantic literature. And he was somewhat of a prince of Paris, a devil with the ladies, but there's no argument about these people.
Well, how do you suspect that these statements and beliefs are going to be accepted by white America and by the white historical community?
Well, they're not going to accept them readily, but if they read the documents, there's not much of an argument.
Well, they can always show you their
who,
documents, can't they?
But they can show me their documents, but one cannot outbalance the other. I mean, I've seen there's a whole lot of things that white historians say that has nothing to do with documents at all. They just open their mouth and say it. Like Christopher Columbus discovered America. Now he's discovered people here. He discovered a whole lot of people already in America. So he discovered America. Okay. Now, and they just arbitrarily say that the Europeans brought naturalist civilization. And actually, the Europeans destroyed more civilization than they brought. And I can go to white documents and prove this. I don't have to go to my documents. According to their documents, I can prove that they destroyed more people and more civilization than they built. All right. Another thing which Rogers brings up in another one of his books called Africa's Gift to America is the pre-Columbian presence of Africans in the so-called New World. That Africans were here not only before Columbus, but according to Professor Wiener in a 3-volume work called Africa and the Discovery of America, he may have been here before the Indians. Now, the original documentation on this came from white historians. And so many times when a white historian is arguing with a black historian, the one thing he will probably have to do is to go back and argue with the white historian from which the black historian got the original base information, and he extended that research further than the white historian. Now, the white historian is in a bad fix right now because he's hung up with a lie, and because he used to open his mouth and say something and people believe it without question, now they are questioning it. I can snow him under with documents, and mostly documents written by other white people repudiating him. So I'm not worried about the document war. I know I can win that one.
Professor Clark, how do you distinguish between the words Negro and black?
I don't distinguish. I mean, I distinguish between the word. The way I have the word Negro is by dismissing it. And I dismiss it because there's no such thing as a Negro, because there's no Negro people and no Negro land. This is an adjective that somebody made a noun out of and slapped on a people against their will. And I dismiss the word Negro. The word black can relate to a whole lot of people, and it can become confusing. You see, people must relate to land, history, and culture. And this is what limits the word black. Because if you say black, and what is the black land? I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. If you say English, an image comes before your eyes, good or bad. The changing of the guards, Buckingham Palace, stout-hearted, the Bengal Lancers, If you say French, good cooking, great lovers, Napoleon, all that. All immediately you got an image. But you say Negro, what comes before you? No images, really. A condition. And a people is not a condition. A people must have a name that relates them to land, history, and culture. And so therefore, the name of a people, if it's going to be authentic, cannot be black. That can refer to how the people look. The name of the people have to relate to the land of origin. Now, no one is having any difficulty saying Italian American, Greek American, French American. I don't think they should have any difficulty saying African American or Afro American, as the case may be. Now, these are people who are black in the main. But let's get something straight. All Africans are not black. Black is the prevailing color in Africa. There are Africans who have not been mixed with any white people at all, who are light brown. And they've always been that way. And they're just as African as the blackest of the Africans. So if we got hung up on a narrow definition like black without explaining that it has elasticity that extends beyond a person being jet black, then we get ourselves into another trap. We get out of one trap and get into two. So now let's qualify what we're talking about with black. But when we're speaking of a people on a world basis, then let's relate them to land, history, and culture, so we'll know what we're talking about. Until someone creates a nation called black, from which we emulate, Black Land, Black Oria, Black Borough, then I'm afraid that the word black is rather limited.
Right. I'd like to thank you very much. You've certainly said quite a few things. The book, The World's Great Men of Color, is undoubtedly going to cause quite a stir and be of amazing educational value. Thank you very much, Professor Clark.
Thank you.
Okay, peace of black power, peace of black power, peace of black power. I hope my people got something from that. I hope you got something from that. Ron, I see you in the house. It's pretty much only me and you in the house, Ron, but it's okay. We got okay, let's just say this here. Thumb up the video, thumb up the video, thumb up the video. Hit that thumbs up for me. Share, subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. This is the Few, the Proud, the For Real TV. I wanted to show y'all that there, just something, from the master teacher, Dr. John Henry Clarke. And I know you folks probably, I know you never heard of him. It's a shame that we don't know about our own master teachers. It is really a shame we don't know about our own master teachers. And you're not going to learn about them in school. I learned about them on my own. You understand me? I learned about them on my own. But I'm not finished. Give me a second here. And I'm going to, give me a second here. Okay, Ron said, looking good. I've heard of him. I listened to him. Okay, my brother. Give me a minute. I'm finna try to grab something else right quick. Give me 1 minute. Since this is Black history, our real Black history. Give me a second. Okay, my good brothers and sisters, I have one more I want you all to take a look at. And this is Dr. Ben, another master teacher. Okay? Just take a listen. Take a listen.
University of Alabama in Birmingham. My name is Lee Naves, and it's my privilege this evening to serve as moderator for the program. We have two very special guests. One is Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan, who is an African anthropologist, an educator, an author, and a scholar. He's on my right, and on my left is Dr. George Simmons. Dr. Simmons is also a professor. He was born in the St. Croix, Virgin Islands, USA, and we will discuss a number of topics this evening. These gentlemen are here to talk about African origins. As you know, in America, Black History Month is celebrated every February. Without further ado, let's get right into it, because I know they have some interesting viewpoints that will stimulate your thinking, even if you disagree with them or agree. I'm going to call you Dr. Ben, if that's okay, because I understand that's what people usually call you.
Yes.
One of the more controversial positions that you take is that black Africans landed in America 2,000 years before Columbus.
I would not specify the day, but probably exceeding 2,000 years. The fact is that Columbus never came to the United States of America or North and South America. He came as close as San Salvador. There's a rumor that says that Columbus came to America. He did not come to America. He came to an island of America. Vespucci came to America, not Columbus. He came to the Caribbeans. But it is commonly stated, just as much as they state, that Columbus discovered America while the Indians sat down watching him doing it. Now, but the knowledge of Africans in the Americas, quite knowledgeable to scholars. The fact that it's suppressed doesn't have any validity at all.
Let me bounce a couple of things off of you. One thing, this article that I'm going to be referring to our home audience and to our studio audience, this article came out in the September 1981 issue of Science Digest, and it's entitled Black Kings in Ancient America. You and some other black scholars believe that these people, African people, came to this continent before Columbus.
We don't believe, we know.
How do you know? What evidence?
The evidence is there. For example, when you go to Central America, the Yucatan Peninsula, and at Ecuador and places like that, they have caches of Carthaginian money found 200 feet down in the ground, meaning that there were pluvial disruptions and those money was buried. So it indicates a period of time, at least from that, when you look at the strategy, you could tell the period of time in which they've been here. And when you're talking about Carthage, you're talking about at least 212 BC, when Carthage was finally destroyed by the Romans. Again, the Queen Makeda, which you call the Queen of Sheba, there are maps which Rome, the church in Rome, the so-called Holy Father, has suppressed these maps from the time of Justinian, showing South America and what is today called Central America. The maps there and Makeda goes back to at least 892 BC.
Before Christ.
Before the
Let me point out another thing, just from the same article. I don't know if we can see this on television, but here is a picture. Tell me what this is, and why do you see this as proof of the presence of Africans in America before?
That is the
Columbus.
head of an Olmec, and the Olmecs were said to be the first of the indigenous Americans. And if an Olmec walked in here, then you would believe that he had come from the middle of Africa. And there is no doubt about it that all of the writers prior to racism admitted that the Olmecs were in fact Africans who had come across here. There is no doubt when Pigafetta and others, the point is that Van Sertima is writing and others, but Leo Wayne in 1938 at Harvard University wrote a 2-volume book for which he was fired about the Africans, Olmecs being Africans. And
let me bounce this off of you, okay? You take the same statue.
Mhm.
You say, well, you say that they're obviously black
African.
features, thick lips, broad nose.
Mhm. The stereotype.
Okay, the stereotype. Other anthropologists say, I think Michael Cole was one of them. He says that this is not a black man. He said the people who made these statues, which I understand are 8 feet high, the people who made these statues didn't have sharp enough tools to give them white features. So they're not really black statues. They're white people carved with crude tools. What's your response to that?
It's strange that the tools were not sharp enough to make narrow noses, but it was sharp enough to put eyelids. So it would seem to me that an eyelid is harder to make than a thin nose. But Michael Cole is no less a racist than the head of the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, what's the difference between Michael Corrigan and the Ku Klux Klan? They have the same philosophy. What is the difference between the fellows writing the Bible and write about the Queen of Sheba saying to Solomon, look not, ye daughters of Canaan, look not upon me because I'm black. My parents sent me in the vineyard, and that's all this nonsense. She's black because nature made her black. Her mother and father were black. That's why she's black. Had nothing to do with going in any vineyard, even though it's in the Bible.
Okay, you talked about religion. We're going to get to that in a while. Let me turn to Dr. Simmons. You also agreed with this position that Africans were in this.
I have no problem, no doubt.
Why?
As a matter of fact, speaking about, like Dr. Ben mentioned, and you spoke about Michael Nico, I own a book several years ago and still have it in my possession by Michael Nico himself, who is considered one of America's leading archaeologists and anthropologists from Yale, one of America's most prestigious schools. In his own work, he referred to them as Negroid. And he went further to state the title of the book is America's First Civilization, what you call civilization. And to turn around and to tell these youngsters and other people in America in particular that the black men were the first to build any type of civilization in the Americas will be disturbing to Americans. And so,
let me ask you this.
Yes.
Even if you're right, let's say you're right, what difference does it make?
it makes a lot of difference.
What kind of difference?
It takes the inferiority complex out of the black man who felt that his only beginning and relationship here in this part of the world is that of slavery. Then it puts him in the driver's seat because, again, they don't tell you that there are man-made hills within the United States. They call them mounds. And they range from in the Midwest all the way down the eastern seacoast of the United States. And they have found artifacts in them that are similar to things found in West Africa and in Egypt, which is Northeast Africa, that predates the arrival of the so-called indigenous Indians to these lands. Another thing is some years ago, one of the major television networks back in New York, I don't remember exactly which one, ABC or which, I did a documentary, and they said that these Olmecs are the ones who brought right into the Americas about 3000 BC. To tell blacks that they ought to be glad to enter into these schools of higher learning today in order to read and write, because their ancestors back in Africa couldn't read and write. You see what it will do to tell them that they brought right into the Americas? Antonio Pigafetta, that Dr. Ben mentioned, who sailed with Magellan when Magellan came to the so-called New World in 1519, when they landed at the land of Verzin, which we now call Brazil, they were met by people in canoes that carried as many as 40 people. And Antonio Pigafetta recorded that these people were jet black. It seemed that they came out of the infernal marshes. That meant that they were burned. He said, naked and black as they are in 1519, 27 years after Columbus's arrival to the so-called New World. Another thing they don't tell you, again, you heard my associate.
Why haven't we heard these things before? Why don't we read them in the New York Times, Birmingham News?
If I stole another man's country and I brought your ancestors here to work for me, could I tell you how great your ancestors were and still expect to keep you in slavery?
Well, let me give you a better, not better necessarily, but an added situation of that. Most black people in Birmingham, Alabama, like in Harlem, New York, are Christians, and they go to in a black community, a black minister, a black congregation, but with a white Jesus, because they didn't know that that Jesus, up until Pope Julius II, had the first black Jesus painted. He had Michelangelo to do it, but up until that time, the world worshipped the black Madonna and Child. The present Pope is going back to Poland to worship at the statue of the black Madonna and Child. That's in the New York Times. But what the Times says the next day, don't worry about the black Madonna and the Child. She was originally white, but there was a storm in the 16th century, passed by and turned it black. But the same storm must have gone to Spain, and then it went to Ethiopia, and it went to the Soviet Union and turned all the black Madonnas black. It was a hell of a storm.
Well, okay, let me just let's get together here. I mean, we're jumping around, and I think we're going to have a beautiful, interesting hour. Okay. Because of this subject, I was going to get to this later, but since you opened it, let's deal with it. Okay. You're in the Bible Belt, gentlemen.
I heard so.
You heard so. And I must tell our audience, we had dinner together earlier, and we got into this a little bit. So you're going to hear some interesting things. Because you guys are taking issue with a lot of what we grew up with in the Bible as fact. And you telling me that's not so. You got to
It
fix
is.
that. What
I
is this
brought it
picture?
right here.
What is it?
Before I show you the picture you
All right.
wanted to see.
All right.
This is Pope Pius XII in his private chapel praying to the Black Madonna and Child and
Right.
all the popes of Rome
Where'd you
in
get
their
that?
private, just from the church, the Roman Catholic Church itself. I just got rid of the copy of the history of the Black Madonna last night. I brought one copy. It's published by the Roman Catholic Order of Nuns called the Daughters of St. Paul. And they said that the picture of the Black Madonna and Child in Poland is reputed to have been painted by St. Luke. Now, St. Luke is said to have been one of Jesus's disciples. He ought to know what Jesus had looked like. So if he painted a black woman and child, who am I to say that he wasn't? Besides that, however, in Anacalypsis,
So now you guys are saying Jesus was black?
We're not saying it. It's what has been written
That's the
until
history.
up until the Nicene Conference of Bishops in 325, when Rome, under the order of Constantine, the Roman emperor, ordered the 219 bishops at Nicaea, and they took away Christianity from the Africans. Just remember that before they said Jesus was born in a manger in Bethlehem, they said he was born in a cave in Ethiopia. It was at the Nicene Conference that changed that. Let's go further.
Wait a minute, let me be sure I'm following you now. You're saying that the birth of Christ as we know it is not accurate.
It's a farce. It was only
You realize what you're saying?
a farce, a lie. You know what a lie is?
A lie is a lie.
The person who wrote that at the Nicene Conference of Bishops in 325 AD, Constantine, the Roman emperor, ordered a conference be held because Rome wanted to take over Christianity from the people who started it. Christianity was started with Pantheus and Boetius in a place called Alexandria in Egypt. And Egypt is in Africa. I saw it up to January the 9th, it was there.
You talked about that a little bit last night in your lecture. There was a lecture last night, Dr. Simmons, here on campus. You talked about the separation of people don't want us to see Egypt as part of Africa. You talked about the historical thing about blacks being in Egypt as well.
Yes, what I did last night.
I don't want to get away from the other point.
No,
I
just
saying
that what happened is that I dealt last night the fact that Herodotus, the institutions of higher learning, white institutions, considered the father of history. He himself, when he visited Egypt around 450 BC, almost half a thousand years before Christ, said that the Ethiopians, the Egyptians, the people of cultures, which is part of present-day Turkey, were people of black skin and woolly hair. All right, and so I just want you to understand that the Egyptians we now see are conquerors, just like people who came here and took this land from the Indians, so that they're not indigenous to Africa, those who now rule Egypt. And Egypt is just as much a part of Africa as Birmingham or Alabama is part of the so-called United States.
Let me add this.
Let me just be clear on this. So what you're saying to me now is that the people that we see, Sadat and all those guys, are not true Egyptians?
But
No.
the fact that
Sadat's mother was a Sudanese. Nasser's mother was a Sudanese, but their fathers were Arab conquerors. The one that was the African was Mohammed Naguib, the first president of Egypt, the one that overthrew Farouk. But 1 year after that, since he was looking for a hookup with the other Nile Valley countries as it used to be in antiquity, he was removed by the Arab conquerors. The Arabs didn't come to Egypt until 640. The first non-African people came to Egypt, otherwise called the Hyksos, in 1675 BC. The Africans there were already in the 13th dynasty period. They had built every pyramid you saw there before. They had done the S-turn in the Nile. They built every one of the major temples that had already been built, including the Grand Lodge of Luxor. The first European to come there did not arrive until the Greeks arrived with Alexander II, the son of Philip of Macedonia.
Look, I'm a college graduate. I never heard all this stuff before.
Because they didn't intend to teach you that. They can't tell you that you're inferior and teach you that you taught Egypt, Europe. The first Europeans to be civilized by the Africans were the Greeks. When you heard of Homer, the first European to have written anything, you couldn't miss that. They said that Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. And that was not until 833 BC. The Africans had already in 255,000 at the Tassili Mountain. They had the Sibyllian period, first, second, and third, the pre-dynastic period, all the way up. The Africans had produced men like this, Imhotep, the multi-genius that designed the step pyramid of Saqqara, the first man to be a physician that even Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, is giving him credit and call him the god of medicine. The Greeks changed his name from Imhotep to Aesculapius. There he is. There he is.
Wait a minute. This gets into what you were saying. So wait a minute. You guys are telling me now that black men taught Homer and
As a matter of
Went
fact,
to Egypt to school.
as a matter of fact, the Egyptians said Homer was Egyptian, not Greek.
That's right. It's only the Europeans said that. The Westerners now said that he was. But let us go back. Remember that Homer himself said in the Odyssey what? That the gods Zeus and Apollo, Europe's first gods, came from Ethiopia. Go read it. And I didn't write it. He wrote it. Thales, from Thales down to Socrates, and Socrates down to Aristotle, which they call the pre-Socratic philosophers and the post-Socratic philosophers. Each and every one, including Plato, who spent 15 years in Egypt receiving their education.
you're saying Plato was educated in Egypt.
15 years.
Because see, what
Before
you-
that, you heard nothing of him.
What
Every
you
one
had
of
me-
them.
What you had me believe then also, for part of what you said last night is that Plato and these guys went back home and they were big guys. But they were taught in Egypt? Is that what you
They
said?
They came there
They
for
came there for their
and
education.
they said it. They didn't hide it.
They
It's the
themselves.
modern writers, the modern instructors and professors who are trying to deny it.
All right, let me
Ancient
get you-
You
Egyptians-
can't have in a
Let me get you-
racist school in Birmingham non-racist education.
Let me get to something you said last night that's not going to make you very popular in this town and may not allow you to get safely out of town. You told an audience last night that you saw, I think, in a tomb in Egypt.
Yeah.
You saw it with your own two eyes, right?
Yes.
You told me that Moses, there were more than 10 commandments. Moses just took
42. The negative confessions. Moses isn't supposed to have been born until 1349 BC. The Africans were already in the 18th dynastic period. Akhenaten, who died before Moses was born, and Imhotep, who died more than 2,000 years before the birth of Moses, and others at the Grand Lodge of Mem had 42 laws called now the negative confession, one for each nome. They go like this: I have not killed man nor woman. I have not spoken ill of the gods. Moses is supposed to be born in Egypt, they said, at a place called Sukkot. Already, it says that Moses get the 10 commandments of Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is still in Africa, right? The Sinai Peninsula is a part of Egypt. More so, is it possible for Moses to be born in Egypt, educated in Egypt? At age 85, he's still in Egypt, and he did not learn the negative confessions. Is it possible for you to go to school, born in the United States, go to kindergarten, elementary, junior high school, and college, and never heard of the United States Constitution? Then it would have been impossible for Moses, when everybody had to read the negative confession 5 times a day, for Moses not to have seen those 42 laws and extracted 10 of them, leave 32 more. Now, if you could go to the temple of Setaiwan at Abydos, to go to the tomb of Ramesses VI at the Valley of the Kings, go to the temple of Edfu, where you would, by the way, see the story of an immaculate conception and a virgin birth 4,100 years before the Mary and Jesus story.
As a matter of fact,
Wait.
No,
let
because
me
this
understand.
is shocking.
Let me just put it in form of a question then. I mean, I don't want to stop this because we're here for information. But what you're trying to get me to believe is that Moses didn't get the 10 commandments from Mount Sinai, but he got them
From his fellow Africans.
Moses was the high priest in Egypt,
Egypt.
a high priest of the Egyptians in Egypt. Then what was he teaching? He wasn't a high priest of the Jews.
There were no Jews in those days. They call them. Remember now, there were no Israel yet. Israel is not until 1196. And when we to hear of Abraham, Avram as he was called, coming into Egypt, the Africans already in Egypt, already in the 14th dynastic period when he shows up. All of the pyramids are built. That's another thing. Everyone, the 62 pyramids in Egypt were built before the first Jew was born.
Why was he fleeing from the Pharaoh?
Let me ask
What
you
was the
something.
charge?
I can write anything when I want to write, you know. Who can stop me from writing if I got the power?
I was about to ask you, what kind of trouble do you get into for holding these kind of views?
Oh, the other day, a black sister spat in my face, and because she couldn't take that. She couldn't take that Jesus was black. She said, no, no, no. I mean, he had no color. If he didn't have no color, how John the Baptist saw him to baptize him?
Do you realize that you're getting at the foundation, that you're shooting and digging away at the foundation of what most of us grew up believing?
Yeah, well, we believe a lot of things for a long time. One thing, they give us 3 pages in the Bible. Slave, obey your master. And that's what we believed for the longest time. They said that Jesus said, so how would Jesus, who fought the system, say to the slave, obey your master? It didn't sound rational, would it? So, look, most of the things, we're in a European system. You could come to this university and spend 4 years, go back and spend another 2 for your master's, and another 1 or 2 for your doctorate, and never had any course at all about Africans. But every day you come here, you got courses about Europeans. This is an extension of European culture, European belief, European racism. And it has no intent of teaching about the Africans. The Africans built the Europeans' first university, the University of Salamanca in Spain. These are historical records. It's just like...
Hey, one of the things you said last night is that it's not just black people who are saying these things.
No.
Most of this information are written by white.
In white books.
It's just that they don't emphasize it in the classroom. As a matter of fact, let me back you up when you open up the discourse. We were speaking about Columbus. None of them in here, none of the listening audience, even in the air, has the faintest idea that in the life of Columbus, when after his death, his family had to go to court because charges was raised, and this is in the record in the Vatican, in the secret archives of the Vatican, that Columbus was shown a map of where the Queen of Sheba that Dr. Ben spoke about, this black woman who had mated with Solomon and produced the son, Menelik I, and they lived more than 900 years before the birth of Jesus, had already sailed through what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, came to lands to the west that was longer than Africa and Europe combined. And that, brother, is North, South, and Central America.
May I add this? Right here at this university, they teach, and I've just been here a few days, right? A day. They teach in this institution because it's the same as Cornell anywhere, that Hippocrates was the father of medicine. He's not until 333 BC. Let me read this for you.
Okay, you teach at Cornell, is it?
I teach at Cornell also.
They let you teach this kind of stuff at Cornell?
They teach it now, I'm there.
Okay.
1700, in 1700 BC, that's 1400 years before Hippocrates, you can find the Kahum medical papyrus. Papyrus is paper.
Okay.
A compendium of information about women's diseases and pregnancies. In 1600 BC, that's 1300 years before Hippocrates, the Edward C. Smith Papyrus, a comparative surgical text and anatomical inquiry. It especially deals with the spinal column. 1550. Let me jump to one here. The Ebers Papyrus. There is the whole book on it. A medical paper by Queen Hatshepsut, the first known queen in history, an Egyptian queen. A papyrus designed to show women how to develop a method to stop pregnancy, to insert into the vagina, made of the shrub of acacia and honey, which break down into lactic acid. Not only that, Monsanto, DuPont.
So we're talking about birth control.
Birth control in 1550 BC by the Africans.
It's a long time before the pill.
A few days before the pill.
But keep in mind, however, keep in mind that Europe is not yet in history.
European history. The Greeks ain't arrived yet.
All I ask one at a time.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead.
Their civilization haven't begun. Homer have not written his Iliad and Odyssey. And the hero.
Okay, all the stuff that you're saying we can find this.
I ain't nothing say if it's not here, it's either in Doc's library or mine back in New York. Nothing we take for granted.
Or the books that we brought down.
And you saying they're not all written by black men?
No. Anacalypsis is written, look now. Okay. Anacalypsis is a 2-volume work by Sir Godfrey Higgins, written in 1838 in England and published by Watson Company. The Golden Bow is a 13-volume book by Sir James Fraser, published simultaneously in the United States and England, and it was published in 1938. Bible Myths and the Parallels in Other Religions, written by Thomas W. Dones, and is published in 1887 by Watson Company, London, England. The Ruins of Empire by Concierge Volney is published, there it is, It's published in 1792 by simultaneously in England and France, done by a man who was with Napoleon de Bonaparte.
Let me just say this about that. If we just give you the benefit of doubt and consider what you're saying to be true, I mean, you are chipping away at everything we've ever been taught, most of what we believe.
But you were taught it as slaves. Nobody.
Slave in 3 pieces?
Yes. We are no longer physical slaves, but we are mental slaves. And this is the worst form of slavery. Some of us believe that the Cadillac and the house on the beach makes us free. But it's the mind that makes us free.
Well, I'm just glad I have to ask the questions and don't have to defend any of this stuff. Go into something else for a minute. Tell us about some of those pictures, because I want to get as much into this hour.
Well, this picture that you are looking at right here is the picture of Pope St. Peter, the first Pope of Roman Catholicism, as the church admits.
But this
the
man
church
has a black
said that
face.
Black face, black everything.
If you strip him, it's black all the way down except his fingernails and all those things like that.
Well, how do I know you just didn't get a picture and paint a black face on it?
No, that is the statue in Rome. That you're looking at now.
Right now at the
Take
Basilica.
a jet.
Can't afford it?
Take the fastest means and go to Rome and
You'll
come
see him
back
right
and
there.
then tell us if it's not. That same picture, I used to teach at Roman
You say,
Catholic
wait a minute,
colleges.
this is there now?
Yes, now.
With
And
the black
every pope
Has to kiss his feet.
Every pope kisses his toe. They said his toes are worn by the thousand kisses placed there. If the book that I got it from was not that heavy, I'll bring it that you see the Pope kissing Pope John the 23rd.
And
kissing
who is this black guy?
Saint Peter.
Peter, the man that they told you, every black minister, every white minister says, Jesus gave Peter the keys to heaven, which means that no white man, nobody else could enter into heaven unless he come by way of me, the black man. But I hold the keys to heaven.
That's right. And there's no reason why Peter should not open for me. He suffered too then.
What else you got there?
Well, what I have here is some black saints. St. Augustine, some of you say the St. Augustine, St. John Chrysostom, St. Athanasius, and St. Ambrose. Black saints of the church. You have to remember that Christianity is called in Europe and by Europeans as the new religion.
Right.
It was alien to Europe. Emperor Constantine is the one who decided to take it. He said, I need a religion to unify my empire. With this religion, I could then conquer the world. And he himself was never a Christian until on his dying bed in the year 337 when he became converted to Christianity. But he took it to unify his empire.
But isn't it Augustine in his Unchristian Doctrines? He wrote 48 different works. The three most noted in the West is his Confessions, which he specified who he was, and then the Holy City of God, and the last was on Christian Doctrines, the fundamental principle for modern Christianity. 3 black women, Felicita, Perpetua, and Nymphana, were the first to die for Jesus Christ. Next, and they were from what is today called,
How do you know this?
it's in the documents of the church. And it's in the writing of the church. And was it not Pope Melchizedek, the 3 African popes of the Roman Catholic Church, Melchizedek, Victor III, and the other one,
Galatius.
Pope Galatius. We have them there. Now, these are church documents. But remember, when there came a time in 1506, after we lost power in Spain, the Africans ruled Spain from 711. We were calling ourselves Moors, M-A-U-E-R-S, then M-O-O-R-S. From 711 until 1485, 774 years, when we built and brought into Europe the university system, building the University of Salamanca, S-A-L-A-M-A-N-C-A in Spain, a copy of the University of Genève from ancient Ghana, which was equally a copy of the University of Sankore in Tombouctou, which the French later called Timbuktu. Now, look, if you want to read it, read Stanley Lane Poole's The Moors in Spain, written in 1887, or Alejandro Macaziza, read his book in Spanish, The Moors in Spain, and said that even the bath was introduced by those Africans.
You said the bra was introduced by...
The bath
Now,
was
this is a different-
reintroduced because Rome had a bath
In the
before, but they stopped because of not understanding the Christian doctrine that the Europeans had embraced. They stopped for over 1,000 years from taking baths. Matter of fact, that like to make mafia the fact
Queen
that the
Victoria.
Queen Victoria of England boasting of herself being the cleanest woman in all of Europe, taking one bath per month. I have books show you where people were made saints for boasting and never even washed their hands. Saints of the church.
Did you have a copy with dirt with you?
No, I didn't bring too many.
Okay, let me, because you guys are bombarding us with so much. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do on a day-to-day basis, Doctor.
Well, my name is Yosef Ben Yekanen. I teach at Cornell University History and Egyptology. I'm an author, former member of the United Nations, graduate with a PhD from Cambridge University in England, a PhD from the University of Barcelona in Spain. That should help. I originally was a civil engineer who turned to anthropology and history with a law degree and practiced law. Now, black people had to know a little bit more to get a job. And I was born in Ethiopia and came to the Caribbean as a young fellow at age 6. My mother's a Puerto Rican, and we lived and grew up in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. My father was a barrister. And I, as I said, worked with the United Nations and then finally started teaching at Columbia University and other places. Got fired a number of times, of course.
I would imagine so.
So yes, with this kind of thing, they don't want, with the documents in my hand. When I exposed that Planned Parenthood was nothing new,
Okay.
that it was done in Africa as early as 1550, I was fired on the spot by Professor Ralph Linton. But about 10 years later, the American Medical Association published the Ebers Papyrus, the same thing I got fired for.
Okay, I want to get back to something in one of your books in a minute, but just tell us, our audience at home and studio audience, a little bit about yourself, Dr. Smith.
Oh, I'm not as fortunate as Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben is the intellectual. So I like to be the other extreme. I like to say that my college is that of hard knocks. And I use myself as the example as to how high a black man could come from mother wit. Mother wit in the sense that it is said that blacks are not intelligent. And so that what we do is complement each other. He being the extreme with all the degrees, and I will remain the little fellow in the street. However, the little fellow in the street have taught at some of your best colleges and taught the professors so that they could teach you. I've taught at Marist College. I've lectured for Yale. I have lectured in most of your best institutions. I just went to do a week seminar out in the state of Washington to educate some professors how to teach in teaching and teaching logic. I think what happened, like some people say, well, Simmons, why don't you go and get the thing? I said, no, at my age, I'm not looking for prestige, but my churn will. And since there's a thing that black people are dumb, I like to sit back being dumb and just waste the intellectual other folks away.
But he's being very modest.
I'm looking for that.
He's my
quote.
associate in my office.
That's all right.
And yes, and at Malcolm King College, and was the chairman of the Department of History in many schools, so he's being modest.
I am.
Let's get back to some of this. Let me see that for a minute. Let's get back to some of this stuff we were talking about last night. You were talking about at dinner. You guys just took on the Bible. And
Which one? There are many Bibles. You got about 3,000 versions, and the one that most people here believe in is the King James version. And when a version is not a fact, a version is something like the original. And James commissioned 47 men under Sir Francis Bacon. He pulled them from Cambridge University, Oxford University, University of Eton, and University of Scotland at Glasgow. Those 47 men wrote God's words.
You're not going to be very popular in this area.
Didn't plan to be.
Okay. This quote from one of your books, and this will be available to our studio audience, and we'll talk about this a little bit after we Get off the air. And I'm not even sure I should read this. This is from a Bible.
That's the Bible in this. You should read it. Read what was in Genesis up until the 6th century. It is still in the Book of Mormons. That's the people in Salt Lake City, which many blacks have joined because they'll join the Ku Klux Klan as the open membership. It is still in the Calvinist teaching in South Africa. And read what was in the Bible up until the 6th century.
So you're saying that this is still in the Mormon Bible?
It's still in the Mormon Bible. It is still in the Calvinist Bible. And they look at the bottom where the Roman Catholic Church had it, and they now make an excuse that they were sorry that it was ever in there, but nevertheless it was.
All right, let me just share this with our audience here and our audience at home. And this is from one of Dr. Ben's books.
And from all the books, that it's on page 120 and 21 in that book.
Let me just share a little bit of it here, because I want to get some reaction from you, and it's something for folks to think about. And you say this is from a Bible. Therefore, it must be Canaan, your firstborn, whom they enslaved. And I'm just starting in the kind of the middle because there's a lot of it here. And since you have disabled me, doing ugly things in blackness of night, Canaan's children shall be born ugly and black. Moreover, because you twisted your head around to see my nakedness, your grandchildren's hair shall be twisted into kinks and their eyes red. Again, because your lips jested at my misfortune, theirs shall swell. And because you neglected my nakedness, they shall go naked. And the rest of this stuff is underlined. And this is a quote from the book. Bible, you say. And their male members shall be shamefully elongated. Men of this race are called Negroes. Their forefather Canaan commanded them to love theft and fornication, to be banded together in hatred of their masters, and never to tell the truth.
That's right. It was in the Judeo-Christian Bible until the 6th century of the Christian era, also called AD, Anno Domini. And some black ministers refer to it. Just a few weeks ago in New York, I was listening to my radio on one of these religious programs sponsored by a liquor store. And it says, the minister says that these young blacks are acting up. We shouldn't act up anyhow because when we die and we go to heaven, we're going to be white anyhow. So we say anything. Remember that we did not know that Christianity came from Egypt, and that the first monastery was on the island of Philae, which is still there now, and that the Christianity went into Ethiopia and all of North Africa, where they had 7 patriarchs and 27 bishops before the first one in Greece or Rome. We knew nothing about that. We didn't know. Up to now, you got black people sending missionaries to Africa, not knowing that the Coptic church is older than the Roman church. We still send missionaries. We still tell lies about Africans eating the missionaries. I wish we did eat the missionaries, then we would have had no problem. But we still got that. We still got roots. People thinking that roots have something to do with history when the man says a novel. People naming their children Kente Conte and Conte Kente and all kind of thing now. But these people,
you take issue with that? You find something wrong
yeah,
with that?
it's garbage. It has nothing to do with history.
Are you calling
It's a novel.
Roots, the most popular television show in the history
Amos
of this
and Andy
country?
was the most popular radio show. And it had nothing to do with black people. It were 2 white Jews. You know, these different people had churches where they taught the people their own history. Look, go into our churches and find out, do they sing the spirituals anymore? No, they got anthems from Scotland, from Germany. They don't sing the songs of the African people anymore in the churches.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong? How does a song from Europe, from Scotland, relate to you? You Scottish? Don't you could have fooled me. But you see, this is the whole thing.
Suppose that we just, not all of it, just suppose we believe half of what you said here tonight. What difference is it going to make?
Quite a lot of difference. Your behavior,
What difference?
the behavior of the child. If you tell a child that all his ancestors and all his people before him ever was, and you prove it to him by not showing him anything that his people did, why would he feel good? When you got busing now, everybody been fighting for busing. So the bus goes, you show me one bus bringing one white kid from a white neighborhood into a black neighborhood to study. All the buses go from the black neighborhood to the white neighborhood. Show me a class in music appreciation where they're showing you African music. It is European music alone. Now it has an impact on the child. The problem that we are facing is that, I see you ask what's the difference, okay. In the church tomorrow, they're going to be a church, and every one of the black churches got a white Jesus. Go into a Chinese church and see if you don't see Jesus got slit eye like a Chinese. Go, you know what I mean? Go to everybody but us. Religion is the deification of a culture. And the gods look like the people talking about it. And the angels. Here you got Jesus. Now give me, how, if you talk about image. December the 25th, coming. You're going to see this, and before. Jesus wrapped with swaddling bands. It says it. Wool. We're in the desert now. It's 110 degrees minimum Fahrenheit. We're in the desert, and the child is wrapped in swaddling band, the wool. What mother's going to wrap her child in a wool blanket in the desert? Let's go further. And on the roof of the manger, there is snow. If you give your daughter an icicle and then tell her, take it back and put it in the oven with 110 degrees Fahrenheit and go back to expect to find an icicle, you're going to find running hot water. But that image is in our head. This is a European version that was painted by Michelangelo for Pope Julius II in 1509 in the Sistine Chapel. He finished in 1511. An image, one picture that says worth 1,000 words. Now you have three wise men in the middle of the desert. One is from Africa. One is black, they said. I mean, how this possible? Moses born in Egypt, and they show him in the book. He was born in Africa. Another one. The angel of the Lord, wait now. The angel of the Lord come to Mary and said to Mary, carry the little boy and hide him among his cousin in Egypt, because Herod wants to kill him, right? She comes and take this child to Africa. Egypt is in Africa. Hid him among his cousin. He's blonde, he's blue-eyed, and he got golden hair. And he's hidden among a bunch of black kids. The army came, the Navy came, everybody searched every house and can't find that boy.
God, time's moving on, and there's so much here. Okay, let me just throw this at you. I'm sure you've offended a lot of people's religion. There are those who would say, or sure I'm thinking, or sure I'm sure they're thinking, that what you're saying is just a lot of racist garbage.
Well, they will say reverse racist. They don't allow us to be plain racist. We have to be different. We're the reverse kind. Now, people will say anything, and even black people will say we will control our mind, our thinking. The point is this, that the person said have never read anything hardly. Let us go into the theologian library and see the amount of books they have. How many of these people have gone and traveled? You see, what I'm saying, there is no major university, major library in Europe I have never been to. There's no major library in Asia or Africa I have never been to. I have been to every one of the major tombs and temples of Egypt and got the pictures and read the hieroglyphs and everything like that.
You even said you discovered England. Tell people
I discovered England when I was, the first time I went to England, I discovered it. I was in the middle of London walking around, doing like this, looking around, and the Bobby, that's the policeman, he came and he says, what you doing? I said, I'm discovering England. He says, you must be deaf. You know what that means, crazy in English. And England have always been here. I says, well, I'm doing like Columbus. I just came here. I'm the first of my people to come, so I got to discover it. They discover everything that they came to, isn't it? They discovered the source of the Nile. Well, the African brought them, showing the source of the Nile. Africans there having a nice bath, naked. Naked, we were bathing very naked because what we got to hide? We were naked.
But you claim that Africans invented the brassiere.
Yeah, but the fact that they invented the brassiere as a string for the purpose of keeping the breast from jumping up and down. I mean, you know, because it causes young men to burn when they see that. But the thing is, as I was listening to Dr. Ben speaking about the European discovery, I thought about going to the moon, that the Europeans have not changed. Up to today, he still operates that way. Wherever he goes, the first thing he does is plant a flag. When the United States sent men to the moon, they didn't care if there were moon people up there. The first thing they did is put that flag. This belonged to us and the Bible.
I'm ready to kill for it.
Okay, putting aside charges of reversed racism, you guys are chomping at the beliefs of a lot of black folk. I mean, at dinner, you shook up some people when you said that, talked about black preachers.
Yeah, but let me just ask you this. I mean, let's just say this.
All right.
People believe, unfortunately, most black people here believe that the only religion black people ever had was Christianity or Judaism or Islam. They forget that the first known religion was the worship of Ptah, P-T-A-H, along the Nile. There was no Adam and Eve mentioned any place yet because there was no Judaism. And if there's no Judaism, there's no book of Genesis.
But you went so far as to say that the virgin birth, Adam and Eve, Noah,
were all repetition, and they could read the works of...
And you said they're myths.
They're myths. All religion is myths. Religion is based upon belief.
There are people who would bet their lives that Jesus was born.
There are people who are dying to go into cemeteries. But that doesn't make things stop. The way we were taught as if there was no other religion but Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. There were religions, and our religion way older than Judaism and Christianity and Islam.
Let me jump
that
to this,
the Africans did. The religion of the worship of Olodumare, for example, among the Yoruba, is more than 2,000 years older than Christianity.
All right, let me get to this because I see time is creeping up on us. We were sitting around the dinner table, some students and people, and question came to you both. The way you sound, you guys may not believe in God or something.
I am married to an ex-nun, an ex-Roman Catholic nun. I drive her to 35 years we've been married a few days ago, and I drive her to church on occasion. I'll go in and listen. I'll go to the mosque. I'll go to the Buddhist temple. I go to anybody's religion because religion is a belief. Nobody has it. Now, you ask if I believe in God, you must first explain, because I met the guy that robbed my house, believed in God. He had a big cross on his chest when they caught him and down at the prison. He believed that didn't stop him from robbing my house. Believing in God don't make you good or bad. The Ku Klux Klan believe in God. The one thing that they said that they have established a religion to protect the name of Jesus. And so read the whole philosophy. Most of the people here in the Bible Belt will cut your throat for being black. Did the Bible stop them from being racist? No. That don't mean a thing because you believe. You believe and your behavior are two different things. And people ask, you believe in God, you don't believe in God. So what that mean? It doesn't mean I won't cut your throat.
Okay, but you said earlier that if we start paying black preachers tomorrow morning,
the church will close. How many of them coming to do volunteer work? It's a business. There's a salary people get out of it, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, or what.
Christianity and religion as we know it is a business?
Big business.
Biggest business is bigger than IT&T.
You get all kinds of tax breaks and all kinds of privileges when you're the minister.
His salary is paid. You think the Pope would be there if he didn't get a big salary? He didn't get the big salary of all. Do you think, no, let's face it. How many ministers you know doing it for free? Just tell me.
Okay, this is
If you don't pay your 10% tithing and see how if you're going to get buried. They leave your corpse right, and may come to the undertaker parlor and say a few words, but not coming to the cemetery. You sing in the choir all you want and gonna get married and see if you have to pay.
What are we to learn from all this? How are we to change our lives? Or how will it change our lives in the better, or can it?
No, I am not against anyone believing in a God system. To the contrary, I do believe in a God system. A system. But what I'm against is that for African people, and by the way, you're Africans, you know, you may not know that, but just remember, if you get a rabbit and put it in an oven, and the next day you go in and it has little ones, you don't call them biscuits. And if Africans come to America and got little babies, they're Africans. Okay, I know you don't like that when you look in the mirror because you can't think you're an African. But anyhow, I have no objection at all. My children, I have a daughter who's a Jehovah's Witness. I have...
Does that bother you? No,
it don't bother me because I train my children. And I know what they believe and don't believe. And in fact, of her being a Jehovah's Witness, when problems strike, it's Big Daddy they're coming to. I know that. And my daughter was trained to be intelligent, that you don't pray to stop getting pregnant. You have to do something about that. You gotta go either to the drugstore or a gynecologist. You pray all you want. If you're having a man, the praying will stop the pregnancy. You understand? But birth control will. Okay, the pill will help. Now, that's reality. I'm not gonna tell my daughter, no, you believe in God, if you've got a man, pray, and the boy will make you pregnant.
Okay, but I can think of a specific example. People who may be physically ill would not go to the doctor. I'm thinking of one particular instance that I know of that.
Right.
Lady would not go to the doctor because she said she'd rather be in church.
She's gonna die soon. I do not want a minister when I get hit by a car. I want a specialist in bones.
Well, let me take you for a moment. Let me use myself as an example. I was bleeding to death. I was going to die. I was losing blood faster than the doctors could give me. And they said, we must operate. And there comes a priest to say something over me, whatever it is. I told him, I don't need him. I don't need him. I want a doctor.
That's right. That's intelligence.
He's standing in the way of the doctors. They need to work in me.
It doesn't mean that he doesn't believe in God. It means that he's intelligent.
And this is because
the priests want the same doctor. If the priest had an accident and the doctor comes up and another priest come up, and when he look and he has a ruptured aorta or something like that, you think he's going to tell the guy, pray, man, I need that, and tell the doctor, go and tell the doctor, get me to the hospital. When you go to the hospital, how many priests, ministers you will see lying up there getting treated? Because they got sense. You know what I mean? It isn't irreligious or godly for me to say, I fell down and broke my leg, and then say, Father, straighten it out. You know what the Bible said? I will help those who help themselves. Well, the Bible could be used for negative and positive. It's got all kinds of negative and positive. The whole thing is your interpretation of it. You go to 15 Baptist church and you get 15 back. Why tell me now, if it's religion, that you got one block 200 feet long and got 6 Baptist church in there? Same Baptist denomination. Tell me why, if you're a Christian, why you need a Methodist, a Baptist, a Presbyterian, a Catholic, and it's the same Jesus.
Why?
Money. Big business. Everybody want to run their thing. If I get 10% from you, 10% for the next guy, 10% of $70,000 a year is good loot. I mean, I could get a few Cadillacs behind that, and a nice home and a nice wife with a mink coat, and you see some people taking the last dollar and giving to the church, and then come and ask me for my dollar.
Let me just, because I've been informed that we have about, I guess, less than 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. We've covered a lot of subjects. We've had a lot of questions. And I guess in just maybe a minute summary, each of you, I mean, we hear about this stuff maybe once a month, Black History Month, and we go back for the other 11, living our lives, being bombarded with other kinds of information. What can we take from here, and what can we do with it, and how can it help us? I mean, that's a multifaceted question, but if you can, let me start with you, Doc.
What I would say is that I would advise anyone to start reading and researching on their own, because I don't know of any school that educates. I've been trying to find a school that does.
What do
And
you mean?
all of them, as far as I find out, all they do is train people to be a bunch of regurgitators. So I say to my students that you have to go out and take that training that you receive and then make it work for the benefit of yourself and your people. And then you show me that you are one who are now happen to be an educated individual. So you have to keep reading and it will benefit you in the long run.
Well, is there any value to what we've been doing here for the last hour?
Yes, because now we have brought a tremendous amount of new information, hopefully, to light, and other people will start trying to check us out, and then they too will become enlightened. We hope that they do try to prove us wrong.
But you probably also offended a lot of folks.
Well, look, new knowledge does. If someone tells you that your girlfriend that you love so well is a prostitute, and you never seen her prostituting, it's shocking. And if you catch her, you really can't believe it. You might even kill the guy for telling you. So I'm not surprised if it hurt, because when you start to change or deal with people's belief pattern that they have held on so dearly to, and many have even offered to fight, give up their lives for their belief, only to find that the belief is untruth.
Okay, we just have a minute left, and I know that's not a lot of time, but final statement on your part, Dr. Ben.
God is truth, they said. And truth is a constant effort of research. There is no limit to truth, and one must look constantly to find truth. I've traveled this entire world. I didn't sit one spot and read one book. I went to thousands of libraries over the age. I'm 64, and I've been from 1938. I have been doing research in the area of African people.
Think you've been making any progress, making any difference in people's lives?
Progress is a relative thing. It all depends on what you're equating from what point to where.
Okay, we only got 30 seconds left, so yes.
No, we haven't made any progress if you look at percentage-wise. And the college campus we are now, professors, let's say, where we got 5 professors in 1,000 students. One time we had no professor in 100 students. It doesn't make any difference. The percentage is worse now.
Okay, we're out of time, and we want to thank those of you at home.
Okay. This is the Future Problem for Real TV. And
we want to thank those of you at home.
I hope y'all got something out of what I shared here. What you can also do now, you can go and do your own research on these brothers that I presented, on these master teachers, on these master teachers that I presented to you. Now you can go do your own research. Our real history. That's why I marked it. I headed it as our real history. So hopefully you'll go and do your own research. So I figured instead of me trying to, give you some history, I figured I would bring the master teachers on. Our master teachers. We have Black master teachers. You understand that? I know you never heard of. Okay. So I figured I would bring a couple, for you to take a look at. So I'm going to shut this out. Peace and Black Power. Peace and Black Power. If you see this video later on, thumb up the video, thumb up the video, thumb up the video, share and subscribe. And this is the Future Proud, the For Real TV. And I was your host, Raheem the Dream, better known as Top Cat. And I guess I'm going to get on out of here. But I hope y'all learned something, heard something. If not anything, do your own research. Do your own research. That's how I found out about these brothers. Doing my own research. I found out, this is maybe 10 to 15 years ago, I found out about these brothers. And there's plenty more. We have master teachers that you never heard of. Because I had never heard of them till they was brought to my attention from interacting with other people. Okay? Peace and Black Power. And I'm out of here. Everybody have a great evening.